So the question also comes up now, is the Bible inerrant? Does the Bible have errors in it? And I always, when I was a teenager, I believed in the Bible and so forth. I had a friend that was the son of a Unitarian minister, so he knew his Bible, but he didn't take it seriously. He said, well, what about Kings 7:23? And he'd always throw this at me, because in 1 Kings 7:23, it deals with Solomon's, this big laver for the temple, which is 10 cubits in diameter, 5 cubits deep, and it has a circumference of 30 cubits round. In other words, everyone knows that circumference is not 3 times the diameter. And so this is not a big deal, but it's wrong, it would seem, that the circumference is 3 times the diameter, and according to the text, and yet we know it's not 3 times, it's pi, 3.14159 or whatever. There's this peculiar number of pi that relates the circumference to the diameter. Well, I didn't have an answer in those days, but later years a rabbi explained it to me as we were talking about this. If you look at that passage in the Hebrew, the word for circumference is misspelled. And when the Masoretes found an error, they didn't correct it. They made an annotation in the margin. The error, that parent error, was called a kathiv, and the corrected version was in the margin called a kiri. And as part of the respect for the text, they wouldn't change it, but they'd annotate what they thought was the correct spelling. Well, the point is, Hebrew is like both Hebrew and Greek. These are 2 languages that have a distinctive in that each letter of the alphabet has a numerical value. And that is exploited in a number of ways. Under Hebrew alphanumerics, if you take the kathiv, the way it was written in the Masoretic text, there's a kaf, a vav, and a hey. The way it should be written, normally, is a kaf and a vav. Well, a kaf is about 100, the vav 6, and the hey 5. So the way it is should be written is 106. The way it is spelled is 111, because there's a hey thrown in there at the end of it. Well, if you correct that ratio for the 31 cubit circumference, you'll discover that it's in a length that's about 46 feet. There's an error of less than 15 thousandths of an inch. So it makes that adjustment. Now, some people also point out that that can also be accredited by a handbreadth, that was the thickness of the laver that Solomon's building, and so they don't see a problem there. But there are something else that comes up with all of this that I have to share with you. There are a couple of constants in the universe that are dimensionless. There are 2 of them in view here. One is pi. It's a dimensionless constant. Pi is 3.14156, 159, on and on. Pi is the same number no matter whether you're in metric or English, whatever units you're measuring, it doesn't matter. It's a dimensionless constant. You follow me? There is another one that you probably have not run into unless you've been in advanced math. If you had a course in calculus or advanced engineering or advanced mathematics, you've come across this peculiar number called E, 2.7183, and so on. I'll come back to that in a minute. There are 2 major passages in the Bible that have to do with the creation. Genesis 1:1, of course, and John 1:1. Well, it's interesting. If you take Genesis 1:1 and you take it in the Hebrew, and you take the number of letters times and the product of letters divided by the number of words times the product of the words, if you do that, it turns out you get pi to 4 decimal places. Well, that's kind of interesting. I don't know what you do with that. Curious. It's a little bizarre. John Napier, by the way, is the mathematician that discovered the properties of this peculiar number E. He actually was an activist for the Reformation in Scotland. He's the one that first used decimal points and fractions. But he's the inventor of logarithms. And the natural or Napierian logarithms, named after his honor, is log to the base E. It has all kinds of properties in advanced mathematics. You'll find it in wave mechanics, electrical theory, the distribution of prime number. It shows up everywhere in strange ways. This peculiar number called E, and it turns out to be approximated by 2.7182818281828, so on. Anyway, what's interesting, if you take the other major creation passage, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, John 1:1, and you take that in the Greek, and you do the same thing we did with the Genesis passage, the number of letters times the product of letters divided by the number of words times the product of words, you get E to 4 decimal places. Now, I don't know what you do with that. It doesn't prove anything exactly. And yet it's interesting that everywhere we turn, we discover properties in the biblical text that clearly went beyond the understanding of the people that wrote it. There's no way you'll ever convince me that John was acquainted with Neperian logarithms.